Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala barakatuh. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Alhamdulillah, in the previous video we have discussed how we are looking into the perspective of our Pi-CBT, and our approach is the integrated SEMP intervention, which as I see, I will elaborate from time to time. And we also understand how, for example, from CBT they have gone to MBCT, where they include the mind. Alhamdulillah, that is a very good progression, and that is consonant with the way in which we are looking at the worldview of the Islam as well as the psychology of Islam. So Islamic psychology, inshallah, will be the ultimate truth which the whole world will understand in the future. So how are we going to then understand the advances in science that has been generated in the field of psychology as well as neurology, neuroimaging and so on? So we should not discount that there's a lot of research papers on CBT, and they're empirical research papers and they work to a certain extent. But there are deficiencies in which you should acknowledge. So we should go back to CBT to find the foundational ideas that is useful for us. So I'm just giving you some idea. I'm just now summarizing, for example, the CBT model of psychotherapy for depression, for example. There are many CBT models for different types, for example, a CBT model for OCD and so on. But generally they are about the same. So this is my summary of how I view CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, and its various research that has been done over the many years. And this summarization will give you the idea that this is an empirical approach. Even though we don't agree with the secular materialistic foundation, where it is only the brain, the interaction between the brain and the physical body and nothing more than that, but we can use a lot of the scientific evidence that they use in terms of, for example, research in neuroscience, which they have integrated into CBT. So that is a very good development, and we should not reinvent the wheel. We Muslims, that's why I use this name, Pi, Positive Islamic CBT, Cognitive Behavior Therapy, because I'm using the foundational tool that is currently being developed and continuously being developed throughout the world in many research institutions, universities, as well as publication of hundreds, in fact thousands of papers on CBT application throughout the world. So what is the idea behind, say for example, the psychotherapy of depression? So you have adversive events, bad events that's happening, all right, and then you have this dysfunctional schema within Beck theory of automatic thoughts, all right, illogical reasoning and negative schemata, all right, and that affects that became the activating negative event. So you can see this approach, and then you have this pervasive negative view of the self, all right. So from here it goes there, and then you have all the exaggeration of the negative self. You have, for example, magnification, you have catastrophising, you have overgeneralization, and so on, which I have spoken in depth in the previous video, the 12 aspects of the negative self. So from here you can see that this is the basic idea which Beck has explained in his approach towards psychotherapy. So CBT will use all these ideas and how they're going to intervene at the various levels. But from the perspective of neuroscience, they are now imaging, all right, using imaging technique. They image to functional MRI, PET scan, and other approach of scan. They have understood that when you are having this negative pervasive view of the self, the activation of the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis is very much activated. The fight and flight response, the whole limbic system in fact is being affected by this activation that causes dominance of the limbic system over the frontal lobe, over the frontal lobe neural activities. So the dominance of the limbic system over the frontal lobe. So we have our brain, all right, we have our brain, we have our frontal lobe, we have our limbic system and the amygdala here, all right. So the whole frontal lobe now is being hijacked by the limbic system. That is the fight and flight response, and that also affects anxiety and then depression. So this deficiency in feedback of negative cognition will affect the defective state in terms of your symptom. So when we look at this whole flow, how does automatic thoughts or symbolic language, the symbolic language that is being used, or the inner speech that is being used, the whole idea here is now negative automatic thoughts activation, and you have negative inner speech. So this whole approach now can be modified. So that's why CBT try to then see how this activation of the hypothalamus and the pituitary adrenal axis, as well as the dominance of the limbic system, to rebalance it. And there are approaches in which through CBT you can rebalance the negative automatic thoughts. All right, and these are the therapeutic intervention that is being used in CBT, even though they just use the aspect of the neural network and the body. All right, they have not go to another level, that is the level of mindfulness, where you are intervening at the point of the mind. And there's a lot of research being done by Dan Siegel, where he brings this idea into CBT. All right, so they have his new what do you call it, mindsight. His approach is called mindsight, not MBCT, not mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, behavior therapy, but mindsight by Dan Siegel, and he is doing a lot of work in that area. So what we do is, when we talk about SEMP intervention, from the Islamic perspective, that means from here to here, if we're going to talk about Pi-CBT will use SEMP integration. So this integration starts from here and it goes all the way here. So when we talk about SEMP integration, at every point of this approach, when we use, for example, we use positive inner speech. How are we going to use positive inner speech? At what level? At the physical level, at the neural level, at the mind level, at the occult level, at the heart level, and at the roh level. So there are interventions, and within that we are able to create an integrated approach of intervention, which inshallah would be far superior in CBT. Even though we used all the scientific advances within CBT, for example, when they study the activation of the hypothalamus and the pituitary, the adrenal and the axis here, the whole limbic system dominance, they can measure. That means we cannot discount that. They can measure, they can see the picture, the real picture of the neural activities in terms of the energy flow, the activity of the brain, and how it is being hijacked. So then, if you intervene just using CBT, in terms of CBT techniques that is used for depression, they can see that this system is being balanced. So the prefrontal lobe begin to take over the fight or flight response of the limbic system, and that create a balance. And that balance slowly will bring about the intervention where the negative inner thoughts, inner speech, and the pervasive idea of the negative self, and the silencing or the reduction of the activating negative events, and this dysfunctional schema will slowly be taken out of that person in terms of the shaping process. So they shape psychologically to bring this idea. So there is a very good lesson here. So that's why when we say that we are using Pi-CBT, there are a lot of fundamental ideas within cognitive behavior therapy that is very, very relevant for Islamic psychology. And if we can harness that, including the basic idea of the automatic thoughts, okay, negative schemata, as well as illogical reasoning, we can then formulate a better approach through positive Islamic cognitive behavior therapy. And inshallah, over the next few videos, I'll try to explain how this can take place. And we can use a lot of the basic tools of CBT. Remember, don't try to reinvent the wheel. What has been empirically proven and used by a lot of cognitive behavior therapists in many, many institutions, in fact, in many, many hospitals throughout the world, can be one of the basis of the tools that we can use. Plus, we add our SEMP integration. Always remember this name. How we can then upgrade it with SEMP integration, and from then on, inshallah, we would be able to develop an Islamic version, Islamic psychology framework, which we already have the model here in this book. All right, we have the whole model in this Positive Islamic Psychology Handbook. This model is relevant, and this model is an upgrade of behavioral model, B.F. Skinner model, because Professor Mahdi Jenkins is a protege of B.F. Skinner, and he realized the nature of our inner speech, the power of the inner speech, and the nature of the human self consisting of the realm of the spiritual, emotional, mental, and the physical self, and how we can intervene using our inner speech through SEMP integration. And inshallah, we will develop an Islamic psychotherapy that will be relevant for the 1.7 billion Muslims, the Ummah, throughout the world, and also will be relevant to all humanity. If we can adjust in terms of, for example, if we talk about believing in God, we can, for Muslims, we can say we believe in Allah and so on. But if we are going to have a client who is not a Muslim, but he believes in God, that can be a very good starting point in which we can find common ground. So, inshallah, when we are doing our Positive Islamic Cognitive Behavior Therapy, as we propound it, we can find a neutral ground for a lot of people. And also we can work with those who are already moving towards mindfulness. They would find that mindfulness works to a certain extent, but it doesn't answer the existential question of their very existence. All right, they have no answer for that. So if we can give them the answer, then we draw them slowly towards Islam. So that is da'wah. We are not going to tell them they're going to pray 5 times a day straight away, but if you draw them down slowly, but surely you'll understand. Because this is the journey of Professor Muhammad Mahdi Jenkins. This man, all right, this man is a hardcore atheist. He ever announced to the world while he was lecturing in the universities, he says, if anybody in the world is going to believe in God, I will be the last person on earth. But he has an open mind. So when he does his animal experiment with B.F. Skinner, he found that animals do not have inner speech, do not have automatic thoughts. Human beings have inner speech. And then he understood that human being has will, the free will to do something evil or not. Whereas the animals is just following their animalistic nature. And from then he started reflecting this whole nature of this existential question of existence. Are we a being existing in this small teeny-weeny earth, an independent being without God, the creator, or we are part of a system which Allah has created? All right? So he then began to study the Islamic, he went through studying Buddhism, Hinduism, many others, including, for example, political ideas of socialism and so on. And he came to Islam, finally developing the Khalifa method. So the whole Khalifa method you see in this book is his work, all right, of how he find that the idea that God has created us good human being, and God has appointed us as his Khalifa on this earth to manage this earth in a positive manner, in the way that we are supposed to perfect ourselves and to perfect the community and to perfect the world, and that is our task on this earth, becomes a very powerful magnet for him to become a Muslim, gradually practicing Islam, accepting Islam, and setting up the Khalifa Institute. And now we have a Khalifa school, Khalifa primary school and secondary school, the Khalifa Foundation, and inshallah we'll spread this positive message of Islam in the 21st century through our certified life coach program. Inshallah, go back to our video on our life coach, communicate with us, and each time you see our video, please pass on, viral it to your friends. Always subscribe, please subscribe, because this is a da'wah. We are not here to make money. We are here to spread the wonderful message of Islam, the wonderful message of Islamic psychology, which is the framework is so beautiful and so intrinsically normal, beautiful, full of loving kindness, that is required by the Ummah now. Because the Ummah has been laden with a lot of misinformation by others as well as by the Muslims themselves, and we have led through the path of violence, through many political ideas that's not relevant today. We got to go back to the path of peace, happiness and success, and create a civilization of gentle kindness, of love through Islamic psychology in the future, inshallah.